get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
Hey, what do you say? You are locked and loaded for another exciting edition of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by my longtime partner in crime, Phil Byrne. And Phil, let me be amongst the last to wish you a very happy Valentine's Day, a happy President's Day, a happy end to a long weekend, for that matter. And we keep on trucking through the month of February. That seems like it's getting closer and closer to the end on us.
Yeah, we're real close to March now, and or the end of March, the start of March here, getting ahead of myself. But we're kind of at that point where I think this was really officially the first sports weekend that we've had post Super Bowl, where we got the Olympics going on, but outside of that, everything else was kind of on a break. So maybe a good time to kind of get comfortable again, once again, with college basketball, some of the college athletics and things like that. So,
Yeah, and that's what's been real nice is, with some of my side hustles doing high school and collegiate sports at, various institutions, that it's allowed me to really hone in on what's going on with the high school stuff and the college stuff with no pro stuff to cloudy up the waters. So that's been kind of nice to have that little bit of a break with not just the NFL, but the NHL being on Olympic break and baseball not being up and running just yet. So kind of a little quiet lull amongst the professional stuff to allow us to take in our pleasures elsewhere. Now, Phil, another thing I want to send you some good wishes on is officially, even though if you look in the calendar, it's a little bit skewed, but officially, happy season premiere of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We are officially on to season 3 of Kneecaps for Breakfast. So if you have been one of the OG followers of Kneecaps for Breakfast from the very beginning, we appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. It's just amazing, Phil, that you and I have over 100 episodes combined of Kneecaps for Breakfast in the can since you and I had that bright idea many moons ago. But we got 2 full seasons under our belt, and today we kick off season 3 because the Super Bowl is over and done, and we are officially into the wilderness of the 2026 offseason.
Yeah, it's a whole new start here, and I think season 1 we were all kind of riding the high of that Lions postseason experience and everything that felt like that, and
then the
season
15-2 that followed it, and
yeah, season 2 had its druthers, and here we are now. So now we're in kind of this unknown space. We'll have to see how the cards may fall. But Vince, we're well on our way to cable syndication with this show. I feel good about it and its chances moving forward. But of course, we only get there, with continued listenership and everything like that. So again, we continue to appreciate and celebrate the support of people that continue to listen, continue to move those numbers the right way. And both of us, again, we do this podcast in our free time. This is not anything that we're looking to make a buck off of.
No, we
or
got full-time
anything.
jobs of our own. I just actually got on the mic for this after announcing a high school basketball game. I literally jumped right from that onto here. So it's something that we very much enjoy doing, but we're not full-time talking heads or anything like that. It's something we do for fun, but we appreciate anyone and everyone that has, whether you've tuned in for one episode and decided to come back for another, or if you've been with us from the very start. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. And God willing, we'll keep on doing this. If a little over 5 months of fatherhood hasn't knocked me off the Kneecaps for Breakfast airwaves yet, I'm not sure what is going to at this point. So we'll keep the train moving.
You are a train, Vince, and let's keep the show's train moving forward.
All right. I don't think anybody asked for
anyways
onomatopoeia in there, so I'll leave that on the sidelines. So we mentioned, Phil, we talked about how season 1 was great. We had the playoff because we sort of started this thing up at the very beginning of that playoff race when they played the Rams at Ford Field, then they played the Buccaneers, and they went to the NFC Championship game, came up a sliver short. And the following season, they went 15-2, and the season ended way too soon. And we didn't have a whole lot of great feeling after that. But at the same time, we still knew that they had what it took to make a run at things in the NFC playoffs. And then once the schedule came out, and then personnel decisions started being made, and we have the draft, and we have training camp, and we have retirements, late in the offseason, and this and that. Then you start gaining a little bit of context to what the 2025 season is going to look like. You and I did the little schedule game by game pick 'em, and you were a little higher on him than I was. But as it turns out, the end result was kind of closer to my line of thinking, and it's one of those situations where I don't always like being right. And in that situation, I didn't want to be right. I didn't want the Lions to be on either side of 500, but that's exactly where they wound up, 9-8. We're not going to go game by game in this episode, Phil. We may jump into that as we sort of move forward in the offseason, but end result, 9-8. Good for last place when you factor in tiebreakers in the NFC North, did not make the playoffs. I'm just going to ask a simple question out of you, Phil, and then we can kind of branch out from there. How in the blue heck did we get here? How did we go from two-time back-to-back NFC North division titles, 2 years in a row making the playoffs? You go from NFC Championship to 1 seed and a first game knockout to nothing at all, and then just being one measly game above the losing record mark. How in the heck did we get here?
It's all related to the offensive line. And I know defense had its own related issues, but I think eventually the offensive issues would start to impact the defensive play. That offensive line is very much like this team's spine, where if there are pieces missing on a spine and a team is missing a bone here or there, it's going to impact everything. It is all connected. It is the connective tissue across the board. The retirement of Frank Ragnow, I think, was the piece that really set this in motion. I don't think the team fully believed if Ragnow was going to retire, if he had mentioned it, before he left Allen Park last offseason. I don't know how seriously they took it. I think they thought that he was just going to play through pain. It's what he's always done. And we'll come see you in August when you report for training camp. He never reported to training camp. They never were able to really fill that offensive lineup with enough veterans that could actually do anything. And for what Jared Goff is, he needs to be able to operate with an offensive line that can at least keep him upright for, say, 97% of the game. And I'm not just saying sacks, but I'm saying like anything with like hurries or things like that. Because when he starts to have to accelerate his own game clock, that's when the passing game, is not good. And this team did not do a good enough job run blocking either for the running backs. So, yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs had another standout season. David Montgomery did not. And I don't think any Lions fans believe that David Montgomery is not a more than capable running back, is not a more than capable starting running back in this league. But everything was connected, in my opinion, to that offensive line. And eventually, when your offense starts to struggle, that definitely shook the confidence of the defense, too. So I kind of pin it all on the offensive line, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think what you saw from Jahmyr Gibbs is just God-given ability. I think his talent alone was able to make up for those deficiencies that you spoke of on the offensive line. I know that Montgomery is obviously a professional running back in the NFL. He's probably got another year or two left of good performance left in the tank. This just wasn't the year to put that on display. But I think when you just compare player A and player B, the overall talent disparity between Gibbs and Montgomery is like night and day. So I don't think it's fair to expect Montgomery to be able to make up for what he wasn't given by his offensive line the way Gibbs was. And I think that's why you saw such a drop off in performance with what you saw year over year with Montgomery, and you didn't quite see that in such a way with Gibbs. What kind of has me scratching my head a little bit, Phil, is just how the Lions handled that whole thing with Ragnow. And I'm sure there were conversations that were had. I'm
Yeah.
sure there were exit interviews and this stuff. I'm sure that the two sides were in touch. But why, in your mind, did the Lions have such a reactionary approach to this whole future proofing this offensive line with life after Ragnow, or even if you want to be really far ahead of it, life after Taylor Decker?
Yeah, because that's basically the next domino to fall, and that's kind of where we are in the off season. That at some point we're gonna have to figure out if this is gonna be similar to what we were seeing with Rack now. So it's a couple things. I think we really bought into the hype that Christian Mahogany had coming out of his rookie season, and I think we felt confident that at least him and Penei Sewell, we knew we had some foundational pieces for the next several years. I think yes, we are talking about Ragnow. Yes, he is the important piece of that offensive line that was not there. We also did not have Kevin Zeitler. So basically, what this meant was Graham Glasgow, who was well past his years into starting, had to start. You also had to elevate another rookie. So that entire interior part of that offensive line was not ready from the jump. So my thing is, yes, they did go ahead and get Tate Ratledge. That's fine. Like, I think that's something that needed to be done, but they just let Kevin Zeitler walk. They didn't go get a vet for any sort of help on the other guard spot. And I think they just thought they were going to be fine. Um, that is not good enough. Like, that is the approach that we cannot have into this offseason, knowing how much is reliant on this line, and potentially how many pieces we may need to go ahead and reshuffle now.
And I think if you were to ask him to his face as a man, did Sewell himself have a good season? No, he probably had his worst season as a pro this past season. So if you can't even count on the main primary building block of that offensive line, if you can't even count on him to have a halfway serviceable season by his own standards, mind you, then you're automatically up against it.
Yeah, I think so too. And here's the crazy thing about Penei Sewell is his bad year or his worst year, he's still up for Protector of the Year, this new award that they rolled out. So, he was still in that discussion. But again, the conversation piece that we're going to have here is if Decker does retire, is this the move that Penei Sewell gets moved over to left tackle, and then all of a sudden you need a starting right tackle? At some point, you can't just be confident plugging in a first or second round pick. If you have Super Bowl aspirations, they're going to have to go get some form of a vet through free agency, I think, to really stabilize this a little bit. The issue is it's much easier to get a free agent, in my opinion at least, on the interior side of the offensive line. Teams do not allow starting caliber tackles, especially left tackles,
Dot,
just to
dot,
skate
dot,
their team
dot,
in
that are worth a damn.
exactly in off season. So
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So I want to build upon your answer, and I don't want it to come off that I'm disagreeing. The lack of performance of the offensive line was a critical reason why they weren't able to do anything of major consequence this past season. But I want to expand upon that with my own thoughts as to why this year wasn't the year they were able to really do much of anything. And I think what we kind of had this false sense of security on is that Brad Holmes is going to bat 1,000 as a drafter. And I think water kind of found its level there in these last couple of drafts. I mean, we remember the back end of those first couple drafts. Let's look at his first draft, 2021. You have St. Brown, fourth round draft pick. You have Derek Barnes, another fourth round draft pick. You got guys who are still to this day making a difference that were third day draft picks. Next year, you have, of course, Hutchinson and Williams in the first round, but then on the back end, you have Rodrigo in the sixth round, who's made an impact. You have James Houston, who for a while made an impact and led the team in sacks there for a while. You had Kirby Joseph in the third round. So, again, after the first and second round, you're getting some guys that were able to make a difference at some point. 2023, knocked it out of the park first two rounds with Gibbs, Campbell, Laporta, and Branch. and then nothing after that. Everybody after that second round is no longer on this roster. So all of a sudden, 2023, okay, it was a good start, but it wasn't a good finish to the draft, if you will. So, okay, maybe get your mulligan and try it again 24. 24. Tell me if any of these guys are considered foundational pieces, not only as a starter, but more importantly, depth, because in these later rounds is where you get your depth at a lot of these key positions. And for a team that's struggled with injuries, you need this good depth on your roster. Terrion Arnold, Rakestraw, Manu, Vaki, Wingo, Mahogany. Out of that entire list, Mahogany is the only one who's made any type of impact. He was a 6th-round draft pick, and even he, in the grand scheme of things, probably isn't really that good. We put a lot of value on him because he did step up in those late season games 2 seasons ago, his rookie year, and basically stepped up and was the starting left guard because there was nobody else. And he was serviceable, but not great. So that's your 2024 draft. 2025, Tyleik Williams, Ratledge, Tesla, Miles Frazier, Ahmed Hassanin, Dan Jackson, and Dominic Lovett. So again, you had Tyleik kind of on a platoon basis on the interior of that defensive line. You got Ratledge, who was your starting right guard, who got some reps at center. It was pretty obvious early on that was going to be a unmitigated disaster. Wound up being the starting right guard, was okay enough, but not great. He
Yeah.
played like a rookie more
Yeah.
often than he played like a seasoned veteran. They used all that draft capital to go get Tesla to where, yeah, when he played and caught passes, they were mainly for touchdowns, but he still probably had about 12 more catches combined than you and I together did. So there's that. And then everybody else in rounds 5, 6, and 7 that I mentioned did absolutely nothing. So what I'm getting at here is these late round, third day draft selections in 25, 24, and 23 have amounted to basically nothing. So when you run into situations where guys are going down with injuries or guys are underperforming or something like that, you don't have that depth that you've had at the bottom of the depth chart, if you will, that you can plug in. Guys that you were able to find in the draft and use them in these big spots. Now you're going out and basically bargain bin shopping and picking up Roy Lopez for a can of pop and expecting him to go out and be your solution at D tackle, for instance. Or, like you said, you're kind of shuffling the deck chairs around by, hey, Ratledge obviously isn't ready for center. We don't have another in-house option for center. So really the only option is to plug long in the tooth Graham Glasgow in to be our center and hope for the best. You see where we're kind of at here? You've got 3 draft classes worth to where you don't have any NFL ready depth that you were able to bring aboard in the draft. The only guys who have really amounted to anything are guys that you are counting on to be starters and impact players because they didn't do the other half of the equation by going out in free agency or the trade market and picking up guys who can be starters for you. So all these draft picks that are any good, they're plugging in at starting positions, and you have nothing after that. There's no go between or in between or anything like that between you're either good or you're not. And I think in a big way, that kind of started to catch up to him a little bit this year. And we started seeing that in a lot of these closer games that they just didn't have the Jimmies and the Joes to keep up when the chips were really down.
Yeah, and the issue here too is all those guys that you just had mentioned, all of those spots now are critical need spots. So, you know, I think we look at some of those names and where they were drafted, and certainly your Dan Jacksons of the world, right?
Yeah, who?
Some overachieving safety at Georgia. Like,
Yeah.
no one's really counting on that. I think some of these draft classes too, like the further that you get into the draft, the more of an issue it is of like, can this guy even do anything on special teams? There's some of that at play. Some of these drafts are going to be a little bit different. Like the draft where we had 4 instant starters through the first 2 rounds, that was such a front-loaded talent draft that, it sets it up that way. But the problem is, really, when we boil it down, was there not an offensive tackle when we took Gio Manu on the board that would have been more ready to play? Take offside out of the or upside out of the equation, but just what is the guy's ceiling? Because there should have been, because he was a day 2 pick. And unless this is some sort of miracle story that we have not heard on, he will be a bust.
And I think that's
And
just it. I think he's closer to being a cut candidate
yeah.
than somebody who's going to be a anchor of that line for years to come.
And the thing is like all these drafts that you laid out, by the time you get to like the 5th round, in some of these spots or these positions, you may have literally ran out of like draftable players in some spots. There should always be enough depth at some of these positions, though, when you are picking in the 3rd round, because we're not usually through more than 100 picks yet, where you're going through guys that really should be playing in the UFL or the Canadian League or something like that. So that's where the problem is. Isaac Tesla, I think, has shown at least enough promise to not be into that, but that was also another spot where it looks like we, you know, put in too much of an investment on for
Well,
what the
yeah, and you got
return
to think of
potentially could be.
context also. I mean, I'm sure as far as raw talent alone goes, yeah, he's worthy of a 3rd round pick, you could argue. But if you look at basically what the options for who you have to catch the ball in front of him, is he going to catch more passes than St. Brown? Probably not. More than JMO? Probably not. More than Laporta when he's healthy? Probably not. You can even throw Gibbs in there. Gibbs is probably going to be in line to catch more passes than Tesla. So if you're at best 5th on the list of target share,
Yeah.
why am I wasting a 3rd round pick on you? I don't need Hendon Hooker in the 3rd round. I don't need Broderick Martin in the 3rd round. I know a real niche portion of the fan base kind of gets hard up on this guy, but like, I don't need Vaki in the 4th round. I mean, come on. Where in that group am I seeing anybody at these key positions of need? You talked about it, Phil, the offensive tackle. Where am I seeing anybody that can go disrupt a quarterback?
Yeah.
And we're seeing it again. It seems like 2 and 3 years later that we don't have that position figured out any more than we did at the very beginning of the regime. Okay, they took Hutchinson. Awesome. I could have did that if I was the GM. You would have did that if you were the GM. What are you going to do beyond that? So what kind of leads me to now is we're officially into the offseason. Like we said, Super Bowl's in the rearview mirror. Everybody is off on vacation, and locker cleanout took place for every one of the 32 franchises, and we are officially into the offseason. So no better time than now, Phil, to start to come up with offseason wish lists for this team. And we can kind of refer back to it and use this as our guide as we traverse through the ensuing 5 or 6 months that are ahead of us here. What are some things that you in particular want to see the Lions accomplish in this offseason, whether it be through the draft, whether it be through free agency, whether it be development of guys that are currently on the roster? What do you want this team to do this offseason?
I think it would always be extremely timely to go ahead and get that starting defensive end opposite Aiden Hutchinson. I don't think the Raiders are going to shop Max Crosby, and if they did, God knows what we would have to give up to go get him. So
Do
let's
do
take
you
that out.
think after what happened at the tail end of the season, because he was always rah rah, I want to be a
Yeah.
Raider for life and all this, and then when they more or less sort of shut him down at the end of the season, he didn't really appreciate that too much. Do you think he's willing to kind of let bygones be bygones with a new regime, or do you think he's still a little butthurt about that whole fiasco?
No, I think a new regime is probably going to help him a little bit, kind of just get back to the basics and kind of being the team leader out there now. I mean, if we get to training camp and we hear otherwise, well, clearly it didn't work. Um, so we'll see. I guess it wouldn't shock me if he was dealt at some point. It may not be anytime soon, but I just don't think it's in the makeup of this team to have us be the front runner, even though I know I've seen some preliminary odds that list us as the favorite. So that being said, I'm going to take that out. What I would like to see is I don't know what is going to happen with Taylor Decker. The way that I would set this offseason is this is a back to basics, establish that offensive line. I do not think you can get a starting left tackle that is going to be worth a damn in the NFL through free agency. So if Taylor Decker retires, I think you move Penei Sewell over to left. You use that first round pick to go, because think about where the Lions are picking now. We're going to be picking at pick 17. And you go get your starting right tackle. I think a mid first round pick at right tackle, I think is a little bit more reasonable than left. But we're not done. We're going to go ahead and allocate as much money as we can to go shore up either the starting center or guard spot that we still need to go ahead. Graham Glasgow will not be starting on this team. I don't even think I want him back on this team.
He may retire
And
for all I know.
I mean, he may. He's had a decent career as far as tenure goes and stuff. So who knows? But they need to go ahead and get two starters from, hopefully the first round of the draft and through free agency. I think the defense has a ton of issues that need to be addressed through some way. But if we're talking literally like highest priority resource allocament, it's got to be this offensive line.
I don't know why I have forgotten to ask you this question the last two episodes. So, from a timeliness standpoint, this really isn't the most appropriate question to ask here in the
Shoot,
moment. But the
what you
fact
got, Vince?
that you have Jim Schwartz, who is basically going to be sitting on his couch for the 2026 season,
Right.
do you, in any dimension, whether it's this one or an alternative one, do you even consider bringing Jim Schwartz back into the fold as a defensive coordinator to where he's excelled at every turn as a defensive coordinator? His only hiccup as a NFL coach was when he was here as a head coach. And you've seen guys, I hate to use the word retread, but resurface time and time again after a unsuccessful stint someplace and be a lot better for it. We're not asking him to be the head coach. We're asking him to do what he does best, and that's call a defense. Is this something that you, if Phil Byrne were running the team, is that something you at least consider?
I think it has to be something that you consider. Um, I don't know if I've ever seen them interact, but for some reason, I just get the impression that Dan Campbell and Jim Schwartz wouldn't see eye to eye. And I almost kind of think it would be sort of like what came of the Mike McDaniel interview, where I think it's like an appreciation of what they are and who they are. But I just don't know if like the two personalities would like mesh inside like a video room, breaking down tape
Fair enough.
necessarily. Um, I think he needs to be a defensive coordinator in this league. I still don't understand what happened in Cleveland. I would have made him the head coach in Cleveland. Like I think he was
The next
deserving.
good decision that the Browns front office makes is going to be their first, though. So it's totally tracks
Yeah.
with what they have done for
So
years.
that being said, that is coming in from the defensive coordinator spot. We've seen it all the time in college. Look at all of the coaches that went through Nick Saban's Alabama teams as a defensive analyst. You go ahead and tell me or identify what a defensive analyst does. And if Dan Campbell can go ahead and at least see eye to eye with Jim Schwartz, I think there is some sort of veteran presence that is needed on that defense for Kelvin Shepard that is currently not there. That could be Jim Schwartz. And I would see if you can go be a defensive analyst.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, again, I'm sounding like a broken record. If you've been listening to this podcast for any number of period of time, you know that I've been as vocal about get somebody on the edge opposite of Aiden Hutchinson to disrupt the quarterback. And this isn't like gymnastics where yeah, you're competing against another team, but at the end of the day you're really just competing against yourself. You're just looking to see, hey, can I get that 10? Can I get as close to a 10 as possible? And if, the other team gets 197.025 and we get 196.97, that's a great, great effort. And you feel great about the fact that you put up a great number. The other team just happened to do a little bit better, but you don't see it as a loss and you're competing against this other team. This isn't that same way in the NFL. You are absolutely competing against all these other clubs and rosters for talent that's out there. And the Bears are in a similar situation as the Lions are, and they need to do a little bit more to build up their pass rush. They proved that as far as offense goes, they're ahead of schedule. They just need to use this offseason to build up their defense. So why should we sit back and watch the Bears potentially go after a Trey Hendrickson or somebody like that and get him into the fold, somebody that we're going to have to worry about making Goff's life miserable twice a year, and have the Lions just take, once again, a ho-hum, we'll fill in the gaps with just whomever. We'll hope to get the same level of production out of Al-Qadim Muhammad or a bunch of patchwork guys that, have been at the practice squad for who knows how long. I want to see a real dude come in and line up on the other side of Hutchinson and make this defensive line a force. And again, been saying it all along, if you are able to take care of the quarterback on the front end of your defense, all you're doing is you're asking less out of your secondary that has been battered and beat with injuries these last couple of seasons, particularly this past one, where I'm not sure we see either of our safeties for at the very minimum 2/3 of this upcoming season, and we don't know what we have with our cornerback room just yet. So I think you need to make that defensive line opposite of Aiden Hutchinson the number 1, 2, and 3 priority this year. That's just me. And you already said the offensive line, so I'm not going to piggyback on what you just said there. But what I will say in addition is, we called it out earlier in the show, Phil, they need to hit on 2/3 of these draft picks.
Yeah.
And I understand they had to give up a lot of picks to go get Tesla and to go get some of these guys these last couple of years. A lot of these decisions that they made to trade up hasn't paid off yet. And we're going to start feeling the burn from that as we get into this year's draft, that we're not going to have as many picks in kind of that 3rd, 4th round range. So you're going to really have to make sure that you hit on not only your day one stuff, but you're going to have to get some guys that can play and can serve as depth pieces on the back end of this thing this year, because we've already seen this is what Holmes wants to do. He wants to build this thing through the draft. Well, guess what? By and large, his last couple of drafts haven't been any good. And I think we're starting to see a correlation to where the on-field product has, by and large, this last season not been any good. So stay tuned for that. And then the last thing I want to say before we wrap up, Phil, is I don't want them to rush to the altar too quickly and throw more money and term at Gibbs and Laporta this offseason. I want them to be able to use some of the money they haven't allocated to other guys to plug some holes elsewhere on the roster. And if that also means restructuring some existing contracts that you have, maybe starting to kick the can down the road on some of those things a little bit, do that. I don't think you need to jump to extending Gibbs or extending Laporta right away. Let's worry about what's right here in front of us and not what we're looking at in 27 or 28.
Well, I think that's a really good point. I think Laporta tight ends are becoming a little bit more in vogue. I think we're going to see a lot more two tight end sets for a lot of these starting offenses, moving forward. But look at the Seattle Seahawks. Kenneth Walker, outstanding playoff run. He had a really good season this year. Super Bowl MVP. I think he probably has another year or two left on this deal. I have not heard that the Seahawks are, at this point in time, looking to extend, a deal or anything like that, just because the shelf life of these running backs is so short. So, us as Lions fans, we got to appreciate what we've got for the amount that we're paying him right now with Jahmyr Gibbs. But yeah, I think that's a really good point.
So we will, again, use this as our guide moving forward this offseason here, but this is just the start, and we can build upon it as we so choose. But I think that's a good place to call it quits here on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. As you are getting this podcast dropped to your device, it is Fat Tuesday, so I hope that with your punchkis or with whatever delicacy you happen to be indulging in on this Fat Tuesday, you enjoy some Kneecaps for Breakfast to go along with it. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning, go Lions, forward down the field, over and out. Talk to you next week.